overview for those of you who don't know. Hebron is 35 kilometres from Jerusalem and the second largest city in the West Bank. It has 200,000 Palestinian inhabitants, and it's thought to be the burial site of Abraham. So it's a holy place for the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews alike. It's important that one remembers that. Sadly, though, this lovely old city, which is rich in traditional culture, because of the military occupation, has become a ghost town. Tension between the Palestinians and the Zionist immigrants has escalated since the 1920s, and in 1948, at the end of the British Mandate and the declaration of the State of Israel, the situation has worsened. In 1968, a group of Israelis went to Hebron. Now, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly. Supposedly to spend Pesach, is that what it's called?
Pesach.
What is it called?
Pesach. Yeah.
Pesach, which is presumably some Jewish...
Passover.
Oh, it is Passover. See how ignorant I am. But they then refused to leave, and it was after that that everything changed. And 2 years later, the first settlement grew up just outside Palestine, just outside Hebron. But there are now 4 settlements actually in Hebron. So it's an absolutely terrible, terrible situation. Now, the worst thing really, well, it's hard to say which is the worst, but the main street, Shahada Street, in that street, the settlers have taken over the upper parts of all the buildings, and the Palestinians live in the lower house. You'll hear how serious that is in a minute. But they've closed off the street, and I don't know if you can show a picture of that, how it's closed off. Oh, you didn't get any of my things?
I don't know what address you sent them to, but not to me.
Oh, well, your wife gave me your address. I don't know. Nothing to do with me.
I thought I sent them to you.
Anyway. It's got mesh and railings and debris all over it. It's absolutely revolting to look at, and there's constant conflict, particularly from some Israeli woman. She's American, and she's well known for her aggressive outbursts, but she also constantly bribes members of the military. So she screams and shouts, and they all know who she is. She's just a terrible troublemaker. The street over the years has been opened and closed and opened and closed, but access is restricted, even to the Palestinians. And if, when you get to Hebron, there's a checkpoint, if you can't get through that checkpoint to go down the part of the street that's open unless you actually live in that street. Otherwise you have to go on a very great detour right round to get into the old town. So that's a nightmare. Now, also this is just the history, and then I'll tell you what happened when we went there. In 1994, the mosque was divided, so half of the mosque has now been taken over by the settlers, and they are completely and totally disrespectful. So they wear shoes, they take wine in. I mean, it's just horrendous, and this is a holy site which in the past they all enjoyed and respected, so it's ghastly. But what we saw was something else. So we arrived on a Friday, and we were met there by Isaac Kavaki, who said, come quick, quick, don't stop, just come quickly. And we're thinking, why is he in such a hurry? So we got to just by the checkpoint, and it was quite eerie because it was very quiet, except for a few groups of young boys. But otherwise, there was nobody there. And he said, just stand here, you'll be perfectly safe, just stay here, stay here, stay here. And within seconds, we saw these boys scrambling up the buildings. And they were actually out of our sight then, but they were throwing stones. Now, you know, they were like that size. And within seconds, the military were there from the checkpoint with their guns. Now, he said to us they've got rubber bullets, but as we know, rubber bullets can cause an enormous amount of... And it was really horrible. It was very frightening to watch, because it was all so quiet, and there was just this going on. And he said, this is actually a ritual that happens every Friday, Friday being their demonstration day. He said these are all disaffected youth. They see no hope for the future, absolutely nothing, and of course they're going to do something. And nobody's suggesting that throwing stones is right, But is it a fair argument that the military come out with their guns and loads of them? So that was our first experience, which was really horrible. And this is obviously, the military showing their power, and totally as a result of the occupation. We then took this long detour around the old city, where we saw how Shahada Street had been closed off by these tall railings and barbed wire. And looking through the rubble, we could see the buildings where the Israelis lived, and with the Palestinians underneath. But then we walked through the marketplace, and that was just horrendous. Because above our heads, and I'm really sorry that somehow I've fucked up the pictures, but I can only describe it as it was from the buildings on one side, there were like these tarpaulins spread over to the buildings on the other side, which looked almost like sort of tent stuff. We thought, well, what's all that for? And this was to catch the debris and the filth and the urine that the settlers throw from the top of the buildings into the marketplace. It was horrendous, wasn't it? Absolutely unbelievable. You just think, what are these people doing, Wait a minute, I've lost my place now. The marketplace was deserted, and I'm sorry, again, I had a picture, because a lot of the trading places, the doors had been welded closed so that the Palestinians can no longer trade in their marketplace. And this is done by the military. So we're walking through this sort of deserted place, and this woman called out from a balcony, and she said, oh, would you like to buy some things? And she had these beautiful embroidered bags. Caroline, can we just see your bag, please? Little example, because I forgot to bring mine. And of course, so she came down, and of course we all bought something, because the chances of them ever actually getting any trade is pretty remote. And they were just lovely, beautiful embroidered bags and all sorts of things. Now the other thing is, we carried on, but because it had been raining the previous day, it was really quite muddy. And the reason it was muddy is because they've annexed off the road, there's only one drain, which is really quite small. I would say it wasn't bigger than that. Would you say that was fair enough? So all the rain has got to drain down here. Now that sounds bad enough, and we're walking through mud, but actually we also could see the line of where the rain would be if we'd been there the day before when it was raining, and it's halfway up the walls, which means the Palestinians can't get into their houses because that's their doorways, and the water is above, halfway up their doorways. And it's just so shocking. But if you think this is bad, it got a bit worse, because we then came. Oh no!
Tell about
This picture here is we were walking along, and you can sort of see, but you can't really see very well where they've been welded together. But then we came across this little group of boys who'd made a fire, and so we stopped and we were talking to them, and I said, we think we should sing "We Shall Overcome," and so they joined with us, and we all sang "We Shall Overcome." So that was a really nice moment.
But we did have soldiers.
There was a soldier watching us apart,
Yes,
wasn't there?
there was. Yes, but nothing actually happened. Anyway, when we got to the checkpoint to come out to where the road was no longer closed, we came out of the checkpoint, that was fine, and then the settlers were sort of standing there, and they just were going on the ground. They weren't spitting at us, but it was obviously, it was to make a demonstration to us. They were spitting on the ground. It was revolting. And as we walked up the road, they looked at us with such disdain. It was really horrible, wasn't it? But that wasn't all. We finally reached the spot where we I can't remember his first name. What was his first name?
Issa
Amro was meeting us, and he's the director of the Hebron Freedom Fund organisation, and he was waiting for us. Now he was standing with his back against a wall, so we were standing circled in front of him, and no sooner had he started to talk, then something flew above our heads and landed on him. It was some kind of container. Now it was not aimed at us. It was aimed totally at him. It caught some of us on the back of our heads, but it was aimed at him, and it hit his head, his face, his suit, his tie, his shirt. It was just unbelievable. And with enormous dignity, he just wiped himself down and he said, "It happens all the time, and I say nothing." It was completely unbelievable. And we turned around and we saw this young boy, I mean, he was a teenager, and he was running back to one of the settlements, and some of our group went off to the military and said, "You know, what the hell is going on? This is disgusting." And eventually he said, "Right, we've got to carry on." But at this point also, because some of us had gone down to the checkpoint and were screaming about how unjust it was that this thing had been thrown, I've just got to look at my thing to get his name.
Oh, yeah.
What was it?
Noam,
Coffee.
well, he said it was
Coffee
coffee.
grounds.
We don't know if it was
Coffee
coffee,
grounds.
but he said it was coffee grounds.
It was coffee.
It was
branded
coffee.
it.
I remember
Oh,
right
right.
here.
It was a full bag of it, they dumped it on
Yeah.
his head.
But I mean, it wouldn't have mattered if it had been water. It was so appalling and
It was
disgusting.
an attack.
But anyway, eventually this guy called Noam Arnon came out, and he was saying, well, of course it's very wrong, and I don't approve of, you know, them throwing things, but then what can you expect? I mean, they have to react to the terrorists.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no way you could have a discussion with this man. Absolutely no way at all. And I would just urge all of you to note down his name and look him up on YouTube, because if you want to see what he's like, there's the most wonderful bit on YouTube about how he is actually addressing this man. He's revolting. He's absolutely revolting.
What's his name?
Completely. His name is Noam, Noam, Arnon, Arnon.
He's got a very bad reputation, hasn't he?
He's got a very, very
N-O,
A-M.
yeah.
Yes, yeah. The one that came out and
A-R-N-O-N.
said that
So, well,
poor
what do you
boy
expect?
was, what do you expect, the terrorists, and of course you're supporting the terrorists as well, aren't you?
So what was it? Was he in the
Right, I haven't finished.
Sorry.
Excuse me, I haven't finished.
Sorry.
So, you might think this is enough, but it goes on. So, oh, yes.
Do you want this on?
You don't
Do you want
really-
this
Well, it's a bit,
Okay.
I would say to you look at it because it's a bit long and you
There
need
it
to
is.
see it all.
He's very
But I would
unpleasant.
say to you do watch it because it is,
His beard was a lot
it's just
longer at the time.
revolting.
Is that him?
Yeah.
Yes, that's him.
But it,
Yeah,
don't you remember
he's
his beard was...
Oh, it was just
much
ghastly.
longer.
Anyway, so we were then urged to carry on walking, which we did. And as we got to the next checkpoint, at the checkpoint, the officer was on his mobile, obviously to the checkpoint we'd just left, and was obviously warning him about us. And he said to our guide, "You move from here in 1 minute, or I arrest you now." The guy was not doing anything. He wasn't doing anything. We were walking up the road, and he said, I can't remember, he said about 2 words to him, and then he turned to us and he said, "Do you know, I can't believe I just said 2 words to him. I just carry on, I never answer them." And we walked back to his house. So when we got to his house, he told us that he was actually waiting to go to court on March the 3rd on 16 counts. The third of which was to have stood up and shouted, 1, 2, 3, 4, occupation no more. And this was his third count, and he said he would say yes, he was guilty of this, and as he said it, he would say it again. He would shout it out in court. Nothing was going to stop him saying it, and for that, he knew he would be taken down for 3 years. But there was no way that he wasn't going to say it, because he'd say that till his dying day. So, well, is this a level playing field? I don't think so.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate. What's quite interesting, this incident, which was, I mean, it was quite horrific, really, because it really brought home the horror of what's going on. But our son was there a week later with a guy, not with Issa, but with a guy called Hamad who works for the UN. And he was taking my son around Hebron, and he said, oh, last week there was a really big incident with coffee. And my son said, yeah, I think my mum and her group were in there. So it's quite interesting because obviously
Yeah.
the story had gone round, you know.
But,
So.
but it sounds like it's such a regular occurrence. But he was so, the thing was that he was so dignified. He just stood there,
Yeah.
he didn't do anything, he just mopped himself down, and he was covered. He was covered.
And he's the chap that's Youth Gates Occupation.
Yes,
That
yes,
does
yes.
marvellous work.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope you got a flavour of what it was like. Sandy, do you want to say
Yeah,
something?
just one thing.
Thank you.
There's always been for the last 15 years an independent group of observers that have been in Hebron. Yesterday they were removed.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
it. I mentioned
really
that earlier,
exciting.
yeah. So that's actually happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we saw them, didn't we?
That's right.
That means anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen. But we're going to Hebron in a couple of weeks, so maybe something else will happen. Anyway, anybody that's interested it doesn't have to be teacher training skills or teaching skills. We had Anne, I think Anne must be stranded in Arundel, that's why she's not here. We had Sam who didn't have the same set of skills as us, but very, very useful skills. So if people want to join, we're going again. We're going in February. There's about a group of 10 of us going in Feb, but we'll go again in October. So if anybody's interested and wants to join us.
Filmmaking skills, not that I'm.
Yes, anybody that's got. So anybody who knows anybody that can contribute in any way. I mean, there's a girl possibly coming who's got an MA in conflict resolution. She's actually in Lebanon at the moment, but I don't know. But I mean. Our contact, Sahel, is just delighted to have people with lots of different skills, basically. Sam, did you want to?
Well, yeah, the film. I've got a friend of mine. He's a freelance filmmaker. And he wants to come in October.
Right. So there we are. You see. So we've now made these lovely friendships with these wonderful people, and so that's what we hope to continue. Thank you very much. If people could contribute to Sam's fund. We were very
I think
grateful.
everybody has.
And is the
yeah.
film online as well? You do
I haven't done the online bit because